According to the Center for Responsive Politics, 4 big insurance companies have collectively given more than $4 million in campaign contributions to the 2020 cycle.
Here to discuss what companies are making those big dollar donations is Hill reporter Alex Gangitano. Welcome back to Rising. Good to see you.
Hey, good to see you guys.
All right, so tell us what this data exactly is. What does it represent, and who is this money going to?
Yeah, so I pulled these numbers from the Center for Responsive Politics, as you guys discussed, and this was Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna/CVS Health, United, and Cigna. And so big insurance companies, and they are
these
giving,
are their employees, though, correct? Who
so
are giving
it's
this money?
their PAC money as well as employee money.
Gotcha.
So that is a big distinction here, because we've had, Bernie Sanders saying, I won't take PAC money. I also won't take executive level money. This also includes rank and file employees, anybody across the levels. And so that's why these numbers are interesting to look at, because, it bulks everything together. And so you can ask, why are these employees, giving to somebody maybe like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, who, if it was up to them, their companies might not exist.
It's kind of remarkable in a way.
Right. So it's a fascinating concept. And about half of the money from these big insurance companies and their employees are going to Democrats.
And so which of the candidates they're benefiting most from these? Who's getting the most money from the health insurance industry?
Yeah, so if you look at the top numbers, it's Elizabeth Warren, Biden, Buttigieg, and Sanders are getting thousands from these industries, as well as congressional candidates and big Senate races. But the most are going to these big presidential candidates.
And so do we have any idea of if there's a split between who the executives are giving to versus who the rank and file employees are giving to?
So it doesn't break it down like that. And so this is definitely something that we'll be following, of how do they distinguish, what pocket to put in, the more executive level and then the more rank and file. I think as more data continues to come out, we can analyze that as well. It's also interesting, I did a similar story with the tech industry. And so a lot of people analyzing the data were saying that, well, tech employees are oftentimes live in more progressive areas, are younger, despite the fact that they're giving to candidates who might not support big tech companies. Whereas it's interesting, the insurance rank and file workers, I don't think there's necessarily a partisan pocket you can put them in. I think they're just maybe all over the spectrum.
So what about the PACs? Do you know what PACs that they've been donating to, or are these company PACs? Where is that money going?
Right. So I was looking at they're giving to the specific candidates, and then the PAC money is bulked into that. But as we know, Bernie and Warren don't take corporate PAC money, and that's a big distinction there. So their numbers are even more interesting, because those are really employees giving to them, not any of the PAC money. And if they did, they would have returned it, and that wouldn't have been included in the data.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting debate on the left, because it's one thing, like the corporate PAC thing is very clear, right? And I think the executive thing is also pretty clear, because they're benefiting very much directly financially from that company and often have that company's best interest at heart. I think at the rank and file employee level, it gets more complicated. You think about a company like Amazon in particular that has, that does a lot of things that are anti-progressive at the corporate level. On the other hand, they have a massive blue-collar workforce that overwhelmingly does support Bernie Sanders. He has the most donations from them. So how are progressive groups kind of thinking about this? What has the response been to this data?
Yeah, so progressive groups on one hand were saying, well, it doesn't matter, where these people work, where they're donating to, because, an employer can't control where you donate your money to, or, what your politics are to the side. And then on the PAC level of spending, it is very normal for a company to give in a bipartisan way, like to want to give to both sides of the aisle. And that really comes down to influence and how much, companies want to be engaged with our electoral system. And so that's another thing that progressive groups don't love. I talked to the union that represents nurses, and they were saying, if nurses want to give to these groups, that's great, but it's wrong that these big companies are giving to the candidates, because it just shows how much they want to be part of the process and how much maybe, they'll expect something in return.
Yeah, I would certainly expect the big health insurers, once it comes down to it, they will spend limitless amounts
gonna be a lot
to
of money.
maintain the status quo. Alex, thank you so much for reporting on this.
Thanks for
Appreciate
having me.
And we'll have more Rising for you just after this.